Genshin Impact is a wondrous game with an ever-growing world, and stylish art design is able to capture the imagination of players. Whether you enjoy the world, gameplay, or story, one aspect that will keep players coming back to the game more and more are the amazing characters. So I'm Darcblade with a character guide to Sayu in Genshin Impact. In this guide we will briefly cover the basic lore of the character, their moves and abilities, weapon options, stat priorities, and artifact builds. Remember though that these guides are aimed at free-to-play and low-spender players, so they will feature characters as if they were mainly Constellation level 0 with 4-star weaponry, although there may be a few exceptions. Sayu is a 4-star Anemo Claymore wielding character who is available through the gacha system, so you have to wish on her to get her. However, there is a rare chance that she may appear in the store, or in the future there may be possible events that give her away for free. We'll have to wait and see. Sayu is a pint-sized ninja attached to the Shimatsuban, who seems to always be sleep deprived. Whether this is because she is overworked, or because there's some sort of chronic medical issue behind her sleep issues, it's never clear, but regardless, she's apt at the ninjutsu skills, honing them to perfection thanks to the Shimatsuban's teachings. Her size is also a source of insecurity for Sayu, and she feels that her lack of sleep is one of the reasons her growth has been stunted, so to speak. Thus, she feels that sleeping will give her the growth spirit she needs, so is always looking for opportunities to hide away, sleep, and obtain this dream of hers. But regardless, her size also is a benefit to her. It makes her a remarkable ninja, able to get into the smallest places, undetected, assist with reconnaissance, or even thievery. The only ninjutsu skill she is uncomfortable with is assassination. Regardless, her skills were vital in countering the Vision Hunt decree, which were all thanks to her ninjutsu skills and her size. But anyway, let's move away from the backstory of Sayu and talk about her talents. Now, in Genshin Impact, every character has access to various talents. These are divided into combat talents and passive talents. Combat talents are your moves and abilities that you perform whilst in a fight, whilst your passive talents are mechanics that work in the background of a character. So let's move on to Sayu's first combat talent, which are her normal attacks, Shimatsuban Ninja Blade. When pressing the attack button, Sayu will perform up to 4 consecutive attacks with her claymore. Alternatively, you can hold down the attack button, which will cause Sayu to spin around on the spot, to which players can steer slightly, causing Sayu to attack opponents over and over again while she's spinning. The final attack of this charged attack as well will also cause opponents to be launched backwards with a stronger, harder hitting slash. Remember that charged attacks do consume stamina though, so that's something to be aware of. Finally, she also has access to a plunging attack, which you perform by pressing the attack button whilst mid-air, which will cause Sayu to plummet towards the ground, damaging opponents around where she lands. Her next combat talent is the Yuhu Art Fuin Dash. This is Sayu's elemental skill. This is a special technique of the Yuhu ninja arts. Basically, when pressed, Sayu will curl up into a ball and start rolling around in a Fufu wind wheel and smash into opponents at high speed, dealing anemo damage. When the whirlwind ends, she will spring out of this ball to perform a Fufu whirlwind kick, dealing more AoE anemo damage. But the Fuin Dash can be used in one of two ways. You can either press the elemental skill, which will cause Sayu to quickly enter the Fufu windwheel state, rolling forward a short distance before going into the whirlwind kick, or alternatively you can hold down the elemental skill, which will cause Sayu to constantly roll around in the Fufu windwheel state before delivering the whirlwind kick. Simply pressing the elemental skill will cause the elemental skill to have a shorter cooldown, but your damage with the Fufu windwheel and whirlwind kick will be slightly less. However, if you hold down the elemental skill, you'll be able to roll around constantly for a small duration of time, which will also increase Sayu's resistance to interruption while she's in this state. During this time, a player can control the direction to which Sayu rolls, and it will allow her Fufu whirlwind kick to be stronger. Finally, the main reason you want to hold down the elemental skill is it allows the skill to trigger elemental absorption. So when you're performing the Fufu wind wheel and you're holding down the button and you roll through a different element, Sayu's elemental skill will take on the attributes of that element. So it will allow her to deal additional pyro, hydro, electro or cryo damage as well. The only trouble with holding down the elemental skill and maintaining the windwheel state is that unfortunately after you exit it, you'll incur a longer cooldown, so that's something to be aware of. If you're looking to perform quick swirls, it is better to simply press the elemental skill, whilst if you're looking for longer, harder hitting elemental skills with Sayu, you'll hold down the ability. A rule of thumb that the community seems to be leaning on is to roll around in the windwheel state for about 2 seconds before unleashing the kick. This provides you with a decent enough cooldown timer, whilst also allowing Sayu to perform the elemental absorption effect to deal additional elemental damage. Finally, before we move on, the wind wheel can also be used as a good traversal tool. It's incredibly fast and can be maintained for about 10 seconds. This enables Sayu to travel around the environment very fast. On top of that, should you interact with certain elements like cryo, it allows Sayu to cross rivers and other bodies of open water, making her one of the best characters for when it comes to travelling around the map. But anyway, let's move on to our next combat talent, which is their Yuhu art Mujina Flurry, which is their elemental burst. This is another special technique of the Yuhu ninja arts. When the elemental burst is used, it will summon a pair of helping hands for Sayu, dealing animo damage to nearby opponents and healing nearby party members. The amount of HP restored is based off of Sayu's attack. The skill will then summon the Muji Muji Daruma. Now the Muji Muji Daruma has several actions based on the situation around it. If the health points of nearby characters is above 70%, it will attack nearby opponents instead, dealing animo damage to them. Alternatively, if there are active characters with below 70% HP nearby, it will instead heal those characters, starting with the character who has the lowest HP. If there are no opponents nearby, it will instead heal the active characters even if they are above 70% HP. So this elemental burst has two functions. It can be used to deal AoE animo damage to opponents, and on top of that it can heal our team. Whilst there are some constraints around the Muji Muji Daruma, this can be alleviated with Constellation level 1, which is highly sought after, but we'll talk about that more in a moment. Regardless, there are a few healing skills in the game, and this elemental burst turns Sayu into a decent healer, especially because it does scale off her attack, which means that Sayu can also deal damage. The downside of Sayu's elemental burst though is that unfortunately it has an energy cost of 80, which is something we're going to be mindful of when it comes to the artifact builds we use for her. But let's move away from the combat talents available to Sayu and talk about her passive talents. First of all is someone more capable. When Sayu triggers a swirl reaction, so when her animo damage comes into contact with another element, she will heal all of your characters and nearby allies for 300 HP. This will also heal for an additional 1.2 HP for every point of elemental mastery she has. This effect can occur once every 2 seconds. So when you stack elemental mastery on Sayu, it means her swirls will actually heal you and your allies as well. This means that not only will her elemental burst heal for more, but it means that she can also heal via her elemental skill, so long as an enemy has been primed with another element first. One way to utilize this is to roll around in your wind wheel state first, so you prime an opponent with a different element before unleashing the whirlwind kick, which will cause a swirl reaction, allowing you to heal via your elemental skill. The next passive talent is No Work Today. The Muji Muji Daruma created through your elemental burst gains the following effects. Firstly, when healing a character, it will also heal characters near that healed character for 20% of the amount of HP. On top of that, it will also increase the area of effect when it comes to attacking opponents. So this basically enhances the Muji Muji Daruma, the elemental burst, allowing it to heal more and attack opponents who are further away. And then finally is the last passive talent, which is the Yuhu art, Silencer Secret. When Sayu is in the party, your characters will not startle crystal flies and certain other animals when getting close to them. What they mean by this is the smaller animals in the games, so crabs, small birds, so on and so forth. Larger creatures like boars and larger birds will still be startled, unfortunately. So let's move on to the next portion where we quickly list off notable constellations you may want to consider getting with Sayu. Remember though that these guides are aimed at characters as if they were constellation level 0 though. So these are pretty much optional, so don't feel you have to go for these. When it comes to Sayu, there is one constellation we need to talk about though, which is constellation level 1, Multitask Nujutsu. This constellation allows the Muji Muji Daruma, created for your elemental burst, to ignore the HP limits and simultaneously attack nearby opponents and heal characters. Any constellation that removes limits on skills are definitely worth going for. They make the characters so much more viable in different teams, so I would strongly recommend going for at least constellation level 1 if you want to go for Sayu. Of course, the other constellations will increase Sayu's capabilities not only in terms of support but also in terms of damage if you wanted to use her as a damage dealer. Now Sayu as a character definitely leans more towards a sub-DPS support and healer role more than a main DPS. Every character in the game can be made to deal damage, but not every character can be made to heal. So as a result, I favoured these two builds. First of all is the Viridescent build. As Sayu is an animo character, she can make use of one of the most effective artifact sets in the game, the Viridescent Venerer. So the build is built around that. So first of all, when it comes to the weaponry, you'll mainly want to go something for energy recharge, so we can use our elemental burst more often. Something like the sacrificial greatsword would be okay, which gives us an energy recharge percentage and allows us to potentially use our elemental skill twice. A better option may be the Favonius greatsword, which again gives us an energy recharge bonus, and on top of that, critical hits give us a chance at regenerating elemental particles. Or alternatively, you can also go for the prototype archaic, which will give us an attack percentage, which will add to the healing effectiveness of our elemental burst as well as our overall attack, and on top of that you'll get the crush bonus, which on hit gives us a 50% chance to deal an additional 300% damage as an AoE every 15 seconds. Or alternatively, depending who you have in your team, the rain slasher may be an okay option, which will give us elemental mastery and increase the damage against opponents affected by hydro and electro. Of course, 5-star weaponry are always going to be the best, such as Wolf's Gravestone, but like I said, these builds are kind of aimed at low spender and free to play players. Anyway, as for the artifacts, you want to go for 4 pieces of the Viridescent Venerer. You only need 4 pieces of this artifact set, so the 5th can be what you need in terms of stats. But for wearing 2 pieces of this artifact set, you'll gain an animo damage bonus of 15%. But more importantly, for wearing 4 pieces of the set, it will increase our swirl damage by 60%, and it will also decrease opponents' elemental resistances to the element infused in the swirl by 40% for 10 seconds. So this will debuff opponents, making them take more damage from whatever element is infused with the swirl. So you would normally infuse Sayu with whatever element your main DPS is, perform the swirl, and then switch over to your main DPS to allow them to deal more damage for 10 seconds. So hypothetically, say you use Diluc as your main DPS, you'll make sure when using Sayu to cause a swirl infused with Pyro before switching to Diluc and then performing your harder hitting moves with him for maximum damage. But as for the stats, first of all, when it comes to the sands, you'll either want to go for energy recharge, attack percentage, or elemental mastery. Elemental recharge will counter that high energy cost of our elemental burst, whilst attack will increase our overall damage and healing of our elemental burst, and elemental mastery will increase the healing effectiveness of our swirls thanks to our passive talent, someone more capable, and as well increase the damage of the swirls themselves. As for your goblets, you want to go for either animo damage bonus or attack percentage. As for the circlet, you've got a few options. You can either go for attack percentage, you can also go for elemental mastery, or even healing bonus. If you wanted to use Sayu as more of a main DPS, you could go for crit rate or crit damage, but this may also depend on what weapon you have available to you. As for the substats, energy recharge, elemental mastery, and attack percentage are all the main ones you'll want to go for. Alternatively, crit rate and crit damage are also welcome, with HP and defense being your least wanted stats here. As for the talent priorities, you'll first want to go for the Yuhu Art, Mujina Flurry, which is your elemental burst, followed by the Yuhu Art, Fuin Dash, which is your elemental skill, and then your normal attacks. Rarely will you be using your normal attacks on Sayu unless you're using her as a dedicated main DPS, but she excels more in a support, sub-DPS and healer role. But this is my favourite build to use with Sayu. It enhances many of her support aspects, allowing her to debuff opponents, heal allies while dealing a decent amount of damage at the same time. But that brings us on to the next build, which is the Elemental Mastery Healer build for Sayu. This build is more focused on Elemental Mastery and healing people thanks to that passive talent, somebody more capable. So for this build, when it comes to your weapons, you want to either go for the Rain Slasher first, which will give us an Elemental Mastery increase. Alternatively, you can go for an energy recharge weapon, much like we did in the first build. Something like the Sacrificial Greatsword or Favonius Greatsword would also be good. And then finally, if you have no other options available to you, you can also go for the Prototype Archaic again for that attack percentage increase. Now, when it comes to the artifacts, you want to go for 2 pieces of the Wanderer's Troop set, which will increase our Elemental Mastery by 80%. And you'll also want to go for 2 pieces of the Maiden Beloved set, which will increase the character's healing effectiveness by 15%. As for the stats, when it comes to your sands, you'll want to primarily go for Elemental Mastery, although alternatively you can also go for Energy Recharge depending on what weapon you are using. As for your goblets, you'll want to go for either attack percentage, or you can also go for animo damage bonus. And then finally, when it comes to your circlet, you'll want to go for either Elemental Mastery or healing bonus. Attack percentage is a nice alternative as well if you have no other options. As for the substats, Elemental Mastery is king, followed by energy recharge. Attack percentage, crit damage, and crit rate are also nice, and then once again, you don't really need HP or defense. As for the talent priorities, again, much like the first build, you'll want to focus on the Yuhu Art, Muujiner Flurry first, your Elemental Burst, followed by the Yuhu Art, Huin Dash, which is your Elemental Skill, and then your normal attacks. Now the main purpose of this build is to try to perform as many elemental swirl reactions as possible. These swirl reactions, combined with this somewhat more capable passive talent and that high elemental mastery, means that we'll have more of a active healer build for Sayu here. So it means that we don't always have to rely on our elemental burst to heal effectively. Whilst our elemental burst will be healing a lot with this build, we can also just simply use our elemental skill, so long as we perform a swirl with it, to heal effectively that way. But regardless of which build you prefer, both of these are quite effective in the hands of Sayu and can enhance the team. If you wanted to use Sayu as more of a DPS role, both of these can work, but I would advise changing some of the stats and even the weapon to something that involves crit rate and crit damage. Alternatively, if you're going through the game for the first time, the Exile set is a nice option as it gives you energy recharge, and on top of that, using an elemental burst also enhances our elemental recharge as well, so that's one option there. But every character in Genshin Impact, whether they're 4-star or 5-star, they all come with pros and cons. When it comes to Sayu, she has 3 major pros that stand out. First of all is her healing capabilities. Thanks to her elemental burst, as well as her passive talent, someone more capable, she is able to heal a team, keeping them alive and in the fight. The next pro is thanks to her being an animo character, she is able to use one of the strongest artifact sets in the game in the Viridescent set. This not only enhances Sayu's damage capabilities, but it also allows her to debuff opponents, making them take more elemental damage. And the final pro for Sayu is she is great for when it comes to exploring the world. Whilst normally smaller character archetypes are a little bit of a detriment when it comes to exploring the world, when it comes to Sayu, she has many aspects that make exploring the world fast and efficient. Her elemental skill allows her to move at incredible speeds, and it doesn't consume stamina, which allow you to get around the map quickly. She is also a greatsword user that allows you to mine, and on top of that she also has that passive talent, the Silencer Secret, that allows her to sneak up on smaller wildlife in the world. But unfortunately there are cons to every character. The 2 for Sayu include the fact that her elemental burst has a high energy cost, so it means that you normally have to run some form of energy recharge on whatever build you are using, and the other con is unfortunately she has limits on her elemental burst, which means that you may want to go for Constellation level 1 in order to remove them. But regardless, her pros outweigh her cons in my opinion, making her a great little addition to any team. But every character in Genshin Impact is made stronger when working in a team. When it comes to the team compositions with Sayu, she can fit well into any team as a support character. Providing a healer role and a debuffer, she can contribute to pretty much any team in the game, especially if your main DPS uses Hydro, Pyro, Electro or Cryo. There are very few limitations when it comes to the team compositions that Sayu can fit into. Overall, I really enjoy using Sayu in my team. Not only is she great for when exploring the world, but I also appreciate how her playstyle works when it comes to healing. Her elemental skill is quite unique, and she can be built in different ways as well. So if you're looking for a healer or a character to make use of that Viridescence artifact set, I'd strongly recommend Sayu. So there we have it, that is my character guide and overview to Sayu and Genshin Impact. Now remember, there are multiple ways to play and use the characters in the game, which is one of the main aspects that makes Genshin Impact so enjoyable for me. So at the end of the day, use the characters how you want to use them. These builds and guides are just how I personally like to use the characters, and I hope they help you out in your adventures. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a character guide to Sayu and Genshin Impact. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.